Hi everybody, I'm Natalia Bonner from Peace and Quilt. If you don't know me, I have written a few books, Beginner's Guide to Free Motion Quilting, Next Steps in Machine Quilting, and my newest book, Visual Guide to Free Motion Quilting Feathers. I love machine quilting feathers. I've been machine quilting full time, meaning all day, almost every day, for 10 years now. I love being creative and taking my machine quilting to the next step. Today we'll go through several designs. I know a lot of these designs are in my books, but I think there's just something so great about seeing them actually stitched out. So this first design that I'm stitching out right now is Pebbles. This design, as you can see here, I'm stitching it out pretty small. It's also a great design that could be used as an edge-to-edge design. Largen it up, make those circles an inch, even bigger, as large as you'd like them to be stitched on your pattern, on your quilt. One thing with these pebbles that I like to try to do is make them random sizes. So you can see as I'm stitching here, some of them are really little and some of them are really large. And then in between, occasionally there are small areas where I've left spaces in between my machine quilting. If you've filled in pretty consistently, you can leave those spaces open and you'll have a great result. Most often with my machine quilting, I do use a matching thread color. However, it makes the quilting a little bit difficult to see. That's why today I'm stitching it out with a nice white thread. I'll let you enjoy the video for a second and then we'll move on to the next design. The next design that I'm going to show you is the double pebble. So this is a variation of the design I showed you before, the pebbles. However, this time we'll go around the pebble a couple of times to make a double. It could actually be a triple. If I feel like I need to, I could actually go around it 3 or 4 times. Now pay close attention here and you'll see that I don't always go, actually most often I rarely go all the way around the pebble. It's usually about 3/4 or half the way around that I'm adding those echoes. So I'll stitch my first nice circle and then stitch all the way around that, making nice double, triple, whatever you want to call them, pebbles. This design is a great design as a background filler. So around the background of a block or around applique, designs like that. Where I'm quilting it small here, it would really make any other quilting, looser quilting around this just pop so nicely. Also with this design, I'm using a wool batting, the Quilter's Dream wool batting, and that nice batting really adds that perfect touch of loft that gives me just the right texture that I like for my machine quilting. So I'll let you enjoy this design for a few minutes and then we'll move on to another fun filler. This next design I call the Clam. You could call it whatever you want. I've seen it referred to as several different names. This clam is a great place to start as far as creating kind of a swirly look, but being a little bit more forgiving than a swirl. It's a great design for a beginner. So you can see here that I stitched the first little clam feather, whatever you want to call it, shape, and then I'll echo around that. Whenever I need to travel, I'll just add echo stitching to travel. With this design, there's no rhyme or reason to how many of the echoes I'm doing or the direction that I'm going. So you can see here that I'm intentionally trying to make my clams go in different directions. If I don't pay attention to that, I usually will start going in lines and I don't get as nice of a flowy motion. You know, it kind of looks like it's all directional and your eye is kind of drawn to follow that line. So by making it really random like I'm doing here, then I get that nice random all over look. So with this design here, again, I'm stitching it out pretty small. I like heavy quilting. That's just my style. If you want larger, if you don't like as heavy of quilting, then leave your stitches a little bit farther apart. Make your quilting a little looser to give your quilt the feel that you really like. This design is the swirl. I love swirls. I love quilting them as background fillers. I love quilting them as all over designs. They're just such a fun design. I'll quilt them small. Sometimes I'll quilt them large, just depending on the density that I'd like for my quilt. So when I quilt the swirls, something to think about is stitching a swirl. You don't want to make question marks, you want to make swirls. So think about stitching more of a circular shape. Now, another thing that I like to tell my students is to think about leaving yourself an out. When you stitch into that circle for the first time, you've got to leave enough space so that you can stitch your way back out. So I'll tell my students often that they need to stitch in to the center, leaving maybe a ½ inch between your stitches. That might seem kind of large, but think about coming back out, that I've got to leave myself a space to travel back out. By doing that, then my lines will end up being about a ½ inch apart, which is a great result, a great overall density for my quilting. Now another thing with the swirls, you can see that if I ever get stuck in any area or I need to travel, I'm adding those little tails onto the back of my swirls, or again, I'm traveling using the echo stitching, as you can see right there. The last thing that I'd like to point out about quilting the swirls is make sure that they're always going in random directions. So watch closely and you can see that I'm trying to go in opposite directions. This just gives a really nice look. They don't seem to feel like, again, like your eye is being drawn the same direction every time. Okay, so now I've shown you the swirl, I've shown you the pebble, and I've shown you clams. A lot of times when I'm machine quilting, you can kind of get, you know, if you're doing the same design over and over and over and over on a large quilt, it can kind of become boring. So I like to play with all the designs. I like to mix them up. I like to be creative and just have fun. Really take your machine quilting to a new place. So with this design here, I'm stitching all of those designs, the pebble, the double pebble, the swirl, and the clam, adding them together as one background filler. It just adds so much interest. And as far as quilting this all over, be playful, be random. If you feel like quilting 100 pebbles in one area and 3 clams in that area, go for it. Have fun with it. It's your quilt. I'll let you watch this video for a few more minutes and then we'll move on to the next design. This next design is a great design for an all-over type quilting, the swirly feather. So remember we've quilted those swirls. Now I like to go back through and add feathers into those. Feathers are so much fun. If you remember from the beginning, I told you that my newest book is all about machine quilting feathers. So I'm a little bit obsessed with them, but I love that they don't have to be traditional. I think we get in our minds that feathers have to be traditional and have to be perfect, but they don't. You can have fun with them, be playful. So this design, I stitch a swirl and then I'll go through and stitch feathers around the outside. Generally, I don't go all the way around my swirl because I want it to look kind of like a half feather. However, if I wanted to make this more like a flower type look, then stitch those feathers all the way around that swirl and you'll get more of a flower feel. You can again see here, most often after I've stitched around my feather, I like to echo quilt around the outside. For me, the echo quilting really just ties that shape together. Now this one that I'm stitching right now, you can see that swirl only had one feather. That is just fine. That's all that could fit in that area. That's all it needs. They also vary in size. Some are small, some are large. Again, vary in direction. Don't make all of them point towards the right. Make them go right and left. It adds so much by making them go different directions. So this design is called Seaweed. I know the name, it can kind of throw you off. That's a little bit funny, but to me it gives this nice watery feel to the quilt. That's why I call it Seaweed. So you can see that I start out by stitching a few long wavy lines. Usually I like to work in odd numbers, but if that doesn't work out, it's just fine. Something else to think about, or that I try to think about, is creating almost a triangle type shape. So you can see here how my shapes have 3 sides to them. I'll stitch 3 sides with long wavy lines, and then I go through and fill in with those pebbles that we started with in the beginning. Just filling in as I go. Again, make these go in random directions. You can have a fun little shape like that. There still is a closed in shape, so I've created a place where I can fill in with my pebbles. And I'll just continue working my way all the way around my quilt until I have filled, or my background space, whatever I'm working on, until I've filled it in nice and evenly with these fun seaweed designs. So this next design that I want to show you, I call it the wave pattern. You can call it whatever. Again, these are just names that I've come up with. This pattern is a great design for quilting on water, on snow. I've even stitched it where, more figurative type areas. if I want it to represent a road, something like that. So you can see this is a back and forth straight line, curving at the ends to travel up as I'm quilting. You could also work your way down. The thing with this design, I like to vary the lengths of my straight lines. So you can see the more random they are, the nicer overall effect you're going to get with this pattern. So random straight lines working in until I fill all the way in. Now if I do this design and I were to get stuck somewhere, as with any of these background fillers, I could just go along and stitch in my ditch to travel to a place where I feel like I can start again. Traveling along your ditch is a great way to move when you don't want to cross over your stitching lines. This design is called the Maze. This is a great design that could be done with ruler work to get nice, perfect crisp lines, or you can quilt it like I am today, free motion, just random straight lines. This is also a great place to start to really learn to gain control of your machine. With a design like this, you can travel over your lines. There's no rules. Well, okay, so there is one rule in my opinion. Just be consistent with your quilting. Don't quilt heavy, super heavy in one area and really loose in another. Just be very consistent with the scale and density of your quilting. Other than that, have fun. Crossover, anywhere you need to travel, just randomly work your way around, crossing over your lines, quilting this fabulous geometric pattern. This last design that I'm showing you is the checkerboard. With this design, most likely you're going to want to use a ruler, a machine quilting ruler, and you're going to need to make sure that you have an extended base plate under your machine, on the throat of your machine. So for this video, it does take it up a step from the designs we've used before, but it's a great filler. Often when I quilt this design, I will use 2 layers of batting. I'll use 1 layer of Quilter Stream Poly Deluxe on the bottom and 1 layer of Quilter Stream wool on the top. Always use the loftier batting towards the top to really make your designs pop. So you can see the ruler that I'm using today is the 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler. It's the ruler that I designed and it's available for purchase on my website, peaceandquilt.com. You can see with this design that I went through and stitched all of my vertical lines. They're all 1 inch apart. Then I turned my ruler and went back through and stitched all of my horizontal lines, again 1 inch apart. Now right here you can see that I naturally work best left to right. That's why I traveled along my ditch up to the left-hand corner and started filling in with those nice heavy matchstick quilting lines. When I do lines like this, I like to use my ruler to help me keep it nice and straight, but if you don't want to, you do not have to use a ruler. The great thing with a design like this is I'm working across quilting 2 rows at a time. So you can see up on the top row, now I'll travel down to the second row and fill in, just working my way across as I fill in every other block. Now when you're using a matching thread, double batting, and a design like this, when you're done, your texture will be incredible and you'll have a fantastic result. This is one design that I've got it on a few of my quilts and everybody just freaks out over it. They love it. When I break it down and show them how simple this really is to quilt, most people are shocked. So continue working your way across 2 rows at a time. When I get down to the bottom row, because this is an odd number, I have 5 blocks on here, or 5 rows, then I'll just stitch 1 at a time and I'll travel across my previous stitch line or in the ditch if I can to get to the next square. I hope you've enjoyed. Thanks for watching today.